My name is Vas Chelhari, and I have filed this account with the Port Vethon Transit Authority because I was the only one present that evening who understood from the first moment exactly what was about to happen and chose, for reasons I have since had difficulty explaining to my superiors, to stop it. I work transit security for Concourse 11 at Port Vethon. 11 is the long-haul concourse, the overnight layovers and delayed freighter connections. The kind of terminal where exhausted passengers sit in dimly lit bars and stare at departure boards that keep pushing their flight back an hour at a time. The clientele is tired, the lighting is flat, and nothing of consequence is supposed to happen there. That was true for most of my 8 years on that concourse. It stopped being true the evening the old human came in off the Solvar connector. He was unremarkable by every measure the automated scanners use. Medium height, slight build, gray at the temples, more gray than not. He wore a plain civilian jacket, brown, worn at the elbows, and carried a single small bag that he set under his stool without looking at it. He ordered water. Not the synthetic spirits the concourse bar stocked. Not the stimulant blends the freighter crews favored. Water, still, room temperature, in a plain cup, and he set it on the bar without drinking it, and looked at the departure board the way a man looks at something he has already decided doesn't concern him. I noticed him because I notice everyone. That is the job. What I noticed after a moment was the number. It was small, printed on a worn plate riveted to the inside of his jacket collar. I could just see it when he shifted his weight, and it was not a transit permit number. It was a service classification tag. The format was old, older than the current compact, older than the Vethon Accords. It was the format used by the Deathworlder Integrated Combat Registry from the third expansion period, when the compact was still drafting Class 9 and Class 10 soldiers, and not yet sure what to do with the ones who came off Class 13 worlds. I knew the format because my father had served for one tour alongside a Deathworlder unit and spent the rest of his life being careful about how he described it. I stood at my post and I watched the bar. The Thurvaki came in 20 minutes later. There were 4 of them, yellow glowing eyes, the narrow, elongated skulls their caste favored, the subdermal plating along their forearms, visible even under civilian transit clothes. They were not passengers. Port Vethon sees its share of Thurvaki debt collection crews, moving through the long-haul concourse. They use the transit flow as cover, identify targets among the delayed passengers, operate under the assumption that nobody in a departure lounge wants a scene. They have been mostly right. Port Authority has a file on 2 active crews. I recognized the caste markings on the tallest one. They did not look at me. They looked at the old human. One of them, I will call him the lead because he moved with that specific, practiced confidence of someone who has assessed a target and found it satisfactory, crossed the concourse to the bar, and put his hand on the human shoulder. Not a tap, a grip. The kind that establishes ownership of a situation before a word is spoken. The human did not look up from his water. The lead said something in Thurvaki commercial dialect that my translator rendered as a demand for the contents of his bag and whatever credit lines he was carrying. The other 3 position themselves in the loose triangle the Thurvaki use when they want to foreclose the exits without appearing. 2, it is a standard configuration. I have seen it many times. What I had not seen before was what the old human did next, which was nothing. He sat. He looked at his water. He set his thumb around the cup as though he was thinking about picking it up. And then he didn't. The lead tightened his grip on the shoulder and said something further. My translator flagged it as a threat escalation, a specific reference to what the crew would do if he did not comply in the next 30 seconds. The humanson said, in standard compact tongue, I know. That was all. 2 words, flat, no inflection, the tone you use when someone tells you it's raining, and you are already holding an umbrella. The lead looked at his crew. I saw it, that small 2-beat look that passes between Thurvaki enforcers when the target does not behave in any of the anticipated ways. The configuration was correct. The posture was correct. The target was a small graying, apparently unarmed civilian in a worn jacket who had ordered water and had not yet drunk it. The calculation should have been simple. I knew it was not simple. I knew it was not simple because of the service tag, and because of what my father had told me once, in a rare moment of candor. about the third expansion campaigns and the Class-13 Deathworld soldiers who had walked out of engagements that had consumed entire compact infantry battalions. He had not told me the details. He had only said that the ones who came back from those campaigns, the ones who survived long enough to retire, were or not retired the way other soldiers were retired. He said they moved through civilian life the way a deep-water predator moves through shallow water, slowly, calmly, entirely aware that the water does not constitute a threat. The lead pulled the human off his stool. What happened in the next span of time I will describe as accurately as my memory and the concourse security footage allow, though I will note that the footage required several reviews before I was confident I understood the sequence correctly. The human came off the stool. He did not stumble. He did not react with the off-balance lurch of someone grabbed unexpectedly. He came off it with the particular economy of someone who had already decided what the next 4 seconds contained and was simply moving through them. In order, he took the lead's extended arm at the wrist with his left hand. He did not pull. He redirected. A small, specific motion, the kind that looks almost gentle on camera, until you watch the lead's elbow and realize the joint is now at an angle it was not designed to occupy. The lead made a sound that the audio feed clipped. Because it was above the dynamic range, the system was tuned to expect from a bar altercation. The second one moved in from the left. The human was already facing that direction. I do not know when he turned. It shows a gap of approximately 1.4 seconds between the moment the lead went down and the moment the second enforcer made contact with the floor. But I cannot reconstruct, from the available angles, the specific sequence of intermediate events. I know the outcome. I know the human's jacket was not disordered. I know his cup of water was still on the bar, unmoved. The third and fourth members of the crew stopped, were still in their triangulated positions, which were now functionally useless, because the triangle's anchor was on the floor, and the geometry had collapsed. They stood at the edges of my camera view, and they looked at the human, and the human stood in the space between them and looked at no one in particular. He picked up his cup, he drank. Then he set it back on the bar, unhurried, and he reached down and picked up his bag from under the stool and settled it on his shoulder, and he looked at the departure board. His flight had posted. Gate 11 Foxtrot, boarding in 12 minutes. He walked past the two standing Thurvaki without looking at them. Not through them, not around them. Past them, the way you pass a support column, a thing that is simply in the space and is not a consideration. He did not look at me either, though I was standing 6 meters from his path with my hand on my restraint tool, which I had not drawn, which I understood with full clarity I was not going to draw. At the gate, he stopped and turned back. Once. Not toward me, not toward the bar. He looked at the departure board again, the same flat assessment as before, and then he nodded at it slightly. The way a man nods at a decision he has already made and found correct. He went through the gate. I stood there for a moment. Then I walked to the bar and called for medical, and filed an incident report and stood over the Thurvaki lead until the medics arrived. His arm required reconstruction. He did not ask, in the period before the sedation took hold, who had done it. He had the look of a man who had already updated his records and would not be making this particular error again. I attached the old man's service tag number to the incident report. The Port Authority ran it. They came back 3 hours later and told me the tag was classified at a level above their clearance, and I should remove it from the filing. I removed it. I kept a copy. I have looked at it several times since then, late at night, when the long-haul concourse is quiet and the departure board is cycling through its slow revisions. I don't know what I'm looking for in it. Maybe I'm just reminding myself that the quiet passengers at the bar are not all the same kind of quiet. Some of them already know how the evening ends before they sit down.